welcome to another episode of In the Studio. I'm Lynn Weaver, your host. The program is brought to you by Davis Media Access and broadcast on Davis Community Television, that's Comcast Channel 15 and AT&T UVerse Menu 99. We're also online at dctv.davismedia.org. Today we're going to talk about fruit and vegetables. Specifically, we're going to talk about how healthy they are and compare the nutritional value of frozen, fresh, and canned vegetables. And to teach us more about this fascinating topic, I have the pleasure to have here two UC Davis professors from the Department of Food Science and Technology, Dr. Christine Bruhn and Dr. Diane Barrett. And not only they are professors, but they're also cooperative extension specialists, and perhaps we can talk about that a little bit. So thank you so much for joining us and for giving the time to our show. Now, Christine, I'm going to ask with you, what is the most important thing we should know about fruit and vegetables?
I have a lot of people asking me, should we eat fresh or canned or frozen? And my response is, you eat what fits in your budget, what meets your family preferences. Eat what you like. The most important thing to remember is to eat the product. There are minor differences in nutritional value of one product versus another, or one form versus another, but they all are contributing important nutrients. They're all contributing dietary fiber. It's the total consumption that counts. So eat what your family likes. Get some variety in there. Don't quibble about one version or another. Just eat it.
And Diane, we as consumers, very often we're in doubt as to whether to buy fresh, organic, frozen, or canned.
Yes.
And this is an important question because in many countries and even here in our areas, there are price differences about that. And of course, with a big family, you sometimes wonder whether you're giving your family the same nutrition and yet spend a little less to bring you to the table.
Right.
What would be your, what are your guidelines?
Well, as Christine said, I think the most important thing is to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. Fresh fruits and vegetables, if we are talking about here in California, we have access to them most of the year. But in many places, fresh fruits and vegetables are not grown, and they have to be transported to those locations, sometimes by truck or airplane, by train, and that can be expensive. And during that time, fresh fruits and vegetables are still alive. People don't always realize that. When you pick them off the tree or you pull them out of the ground, they're still respiring, they're still living, and they tend to have a loss of nutrients over time as we transport them.
So would you say, Diane, that what would be the best rule of thumb? Buy fresh local?
Buying fresh local is a wonderful idea. If you have a farmer's market or a grocery store that has a lot of local produce. Frozen and canned are also excellent alternatives. Freezing is usually done within hours of harvest. Most of the freezing plants are located close to the growing area, and so the product is frozen and kind of locked in terms of nutrients very quickly. Canned foods are also often processed very close to where they're produced, so again the nutrients are locked in, and canned and frozen products can be transported all over the world. So. Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting. And later on in the program, in the interview, you're going to give us a demonstration of some of the samples of vegetables, canned, frozen, and fresh that we have here. But before we do this, you know, I always wondered, and I'll ask Diane this, but please jump in, Christine, and add more details to that. Does color really mean anything when it comes to fruit and vegetables?
Well, with some fruits and vegetables, the colors, the pigments, are also nutrients. So you think about things like tomatoes. We have some tomatoes here.
Yes.
The red fruit. This red is lycopene, which is a carotenoid, and it's a precursor, can be a precursor to vitamin A. So the carotenoids add nutrients to our diet. So in many cases, the color is an indicator that it's a nutrient. Blueberries, raspberries, those have anthocyanins, and those are also beneficial antioxidants. They're similar to the compounds we find in wine and other commodities.
So they're there for a reason. Nature put color in the vegetables and the fruit for a reason. So when we choose, we should have a variety of colors, like a rainbow of colors.
Yes.
Well, that sounds very interesting. And Christine, you were talking a little bit about white vegetables, or no color vegetables. So what kind of property do they have?
Yes, they do.
White vegetables can contribute as well. Not all nutrients are pigments. Vitamin C, for example, is not something that you would see.
Point. Yes.
So you can have nutrients from them. And remember, produce is also providing fiber, dietary fiber, and minerals. So all of these are important, and you can have a white product that still is nutritious for you. I have mentioned before, all things matter, canned, fresh, frozen, dried as well. I sometimes am concerned in the market when people select dried fruit that has lost its natural color. For example, apricots are very rich sources of vitamin A, and you can see that still in a dried product. They are bright orange. Some people are concerned, sometimes sulfur is used to maintain that orange pigment. There are other things that can be used as well, but when you have a brown dried apricot or peach, it's lost that vitamin A. So they might advertise no sulfur used. Well, if you're sensitive to sulfur because of an asthmatic condition or something, that might be of issue for you. But if you're getting the apricot because of its good taste and because of its vitamin A, get the orange ones, because the brown ones don't have very much there.
And would that be perhaps canned apricots? Because I know apricots come and go very quickly.
Right.
And would you say that a canned apricot would retain some of that vitamin A?
Well, we found, Diane and I did a literature review of the published work where they examined fresh, frozen, and canned and dried and looked at the change in nutrients. And actually vitamin A is one of those nutrients that's quite stable during heat. And vitamin A is well retained in canned products.
That's interesting.
And the lycopene that Diane referred to earlier, she showed the fresh tomato, which is a wonderful product and a great thing. I love fresh tomatoes. But don't forget canned tomatoes. And actually the research has found that there's more lycopene available for our body in the canned product than the fresh.
I was going to mention that.
And why is that?
Well, people say because it's more extracted, so a little bit of heat kind of loosens it from the cellular matrix. So these pigments are within a plant cell, maybe in some small organelle in the plant cell. And heating, which happens with canning in particular, helps to loosen that from the tissue. And our thought is that when your body absorbs it, it's also more available. It's easier to access.
Oh, very interesting.
Isn't that?
You know, a lot of the things that you are mentioning are pretty new to me. And I did some research before the interview, and I noticed that there are very few studies that at least I can understand about what you just talked about. Would you agree with me that perhaps we need more studies in trying to understand? Christine, what do you think?
There are many studies, but they don't always use the same technique of analysis, and that is one factor that needs to be addressed. If you're going to compare one product to another, and you're going to look across studies, they need to use the same standard methods of analysis.
Absolutely.
Right,
Yes.
So generally, an academic person, we strive to look at the scientific consensus,
Yes.
and we don't take one study up and say, "Ooh, this shows, X, Y, Z,"
Headlines,
and it's the
right.
only study, and there's many, 300 that show something else. So we like to look at the total amount of data, and we always are learning more about diet and health.
Right.
So one of the groups of chemicals that are called phytochemicals, plant-related chemicals, some of them appear to have health-promoting properties, but where we don't know yet is exactly how much is needed,
Right,
and
right.
what would be too much. And in that regard, we could always use more research to get it better understand the effect, the level of phytochemicals, the variation across plants, and how much we need for optimum health ourselves.
It sounds very complex.
Well,
it is actually,
Yes.
and that's why when people ask us this question, which is better, it really depends.
Depends, yes.
In the studies that Christina is talking about, a lot of people have not started with the same raw material, so they'll compare apples grown in California to those grown in New York, and the cultivars are different, the growing conditions are different, and those things actually have quite a bit to do with the nutrient content. Maybe even
Yes.
more than the way that these things are preserved.
Yes.
But the bottom line for people is generally we're not eating enough.
Right.
So we can talk about
To that.
one apple versus another, or should you
Yeah.
eat a pear or an
Yes.
apple, or should
Right.
you eat this or that.
Yes.
The important thing
Eat
is
more.
to eat it. And the dietary guidance that comes from the federal government, the USDA dietary guidelines,
Yes.
they have something called My Plate. And people can
I'm
go
familiar with
online
that, yes.
and
Yeah.
figure out their own plate.
Diets,
And from
right.
this perspective, half the plate is supposed to be fruits and vegetables.
Yes.
So don't worry about should it be
form.
navel orange or a Valencian orange, or how about a red orange? Make it an orange.
Make it an
and it's
orange.
not a nutrient unless you get it in your body. So get something that you can afford, that works within your time schedule, because my goodness, we're all busy.
Yes.
And get something that your family's going to eat so that it really affects them because they enjoyed it.
Yes. Well, some diets, I remember in Northern Europe, for example, we didn't have a lot of fruit and
Choice,
vegetables,
right.
especially in the winter.
Right.
Having an orange seemed
Right.
like the most wonderful thing you could
Yes.
have. And so we had a lot of potatoes, but sometimes the way we cooked the potatoes, I know English people, Scottish people love potatoes. We cooked them, we take away all the
Nutrients.
the nutrients
Right,
by
right.
overcooking maybe, or peeling
Right.
them too much. But now we have a huge variety every season. So another question comes to mind. Do fruit and vegetable need fresh? I'm talking about fresh. Need to be ripe to be good for you. I mean, apart from taste, of course. But
Yeah, that's a very good question. I haven't actually seen too many studies kind of tracking the nutrients through maturity. I think for people to eat them, they would have to be ripe.
Yes.
The flavor and the sugar content really increases late in maturation.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
yes.
if you harvest early, you're missing some of that flavor and color
Yes.
development, and perhaps some of the nutrient development too.
And of course, very big growers tend to do that, because then they have to transport them, and they have to arrive all nice and
Right.
plump,
Right,
in the
right.
store. So that's
Yes.
very interesting. I don't know how much you know about this, but friends and family and the people on the street, they often are dead against canned vegetables for the following reason. Well, the aluminum contains contaminants. The cans used overseas are generally made of uncontrolled metal that is not approved for consumption, I mean for canning fruit and vegetable. What do you think about that?
Yeah,
Diane?
I think the Food and Drug Administration of the United States checks imports as well as our own food production.
That's reassuring.
That's reassuring, yes. Someone's watching these things. I mean, they can't expect or inspect everything, but they do inspect a good percentage. And there are limits that are allowed for certain components and metals.
Yes.
And there are standards involved. I know that some cans that contain fruit actually have an enamel coating because fruit is very acidic, and so it can actually eat away at the metal. But to prevent that, they coat with a certain, it's called an enamel, but a certain polymer.
I've seen it, I think.
Fruit
yes.
enamel, yeah.
Yes.
So it prevents the acid breaking the can.
Breaking the can.
Yeah.
Christine, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, actually, it's very interesting that canned products also have a date on them.
Yeah,
and some products last a longer time than others depending upon the acidity.
Yes, the expiration date. Yes.
You can go online and look up information about canned products and dates. I'm sure you can do a Google search on this. They often use what's called a Julian calendar, which is January 1st is 1 and January 2nd is 2. And so they will have indication as to when the product was processed. They might have indication on when it would be wise to use it. And our own storage at home can impact shelf life.
Right. Yeah.
We need to store it in a moderate temperature, like a room temperature. You don't
In
want
the pantry.
don't want to store any of your goods in the garage and the attic. You know, and how it is here in California. That garage gets over 100 degrees very easily, and that will shorten the life of your product. So even when it's canned, it can have a limit. Though that's one of the really advantages of canned. We are all busy. I do not shop every day or even every other day. And I must admit, sometimes I'm on my way home and I think, what's going to be for dinner tonight? and the good thing about the canned and the frozen is that you can buy in quantity and it's available for you.
Yes.
Because we eat what's convenient. And let's make these other processes that help make the fruit and vegetable
And sometimes
convenient.
if we don't have them ready, we skip them.
That's
true.
right. We choose something else.
Yeah, but you mentioned, Christine, you gave me the example of canned cherries, and you can make wonderful cherry pies out of it. Can you talk for a couple of minutes about your cherry pies?
Yeah, this is one of our stories.
And then we'll go on to the demonstration here that we have.
Well, Diane and I have a wonderful time working together, and in this particular project where we did a review of the fresh, frozen, canned, dried, fresh cherries are great. And we're so fortunate in California, we can have fresh cherries. And they have a phytonutrient that is good for us. And so you buy it and you eat it. But as Diane pointed out, plants, the plant tissue, even the fruit, it's a living tissue. And the enzymes in the cherry slowly break those phytochemicals down. So fresh off your tree, it's at the highest level, and over time it goes down, 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 down. Well, if you can cherries, of course you have them available year-round, and although heat can be destructive and breaks down some of the phytochemicals, heat also destroys the enzymes that were breaking them down.
That's right.
So it preserves it at a particular level of phytochemical concentration. And then, being in a canned product, some of those great chemicals go into the juice. So, oh gosh, eating the cherries, eating the juice. My husband's personal favorite is canned cherry pies. I admit I don't make enough for him. But when I make him a canned cherry pie, he gets the phytochemicals in the cherries and the phytochemicals in the juice and the joy of the pie, and it's just
next
good
time,
all the way around.
You come and join us for your next interview. One of the requirements would be
Bring
cherry pie.
Well, we have a display here, and Christine and Diane will demonstrate, or will discuss some of these products. And you can see we have a melon, we have frozen and fresh squash, we have a head of lettuce, romaine lettuce, and and we have canned tomatoes, fresh tomatoes, frozen beans, and fresh beans,
Yes.
and packaged lettuce. And if we may, I'd like to start with the packaged lettuce, because there's an ongoing controversy between the children, my children and myself, because when I opened a package of lettuce, I always say we have to rinse it. And my son says, no, that's wrong. And am I wrong or am I right?
Actually, this is the time when we learn from our children. Colleagues and I have done work on how people wash products and how effective is washing in removing microbes, and what is practical for people to do.
Yes.
And if a product has been washed in the processing facility, and they double or triple wash it, and they remove about 90 or a little bit more than 90% of the microbes, and they package it. Now, this package needs to
Can
kept
you hold
cold.
it up so that people can see this?
This package needs to be
specimen.
kept cold, because bacteria can grow, and
So in the
product.
refrigerator.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, not even in a cold counter. For example, E. coli, one of the pathogens that have been associated with produce, can grow at 50 degrees. Our refrigerator should be 40 or below. So don't keep it in any form on the counter. Keep these things cold to keep those bacteria growth down. But we recommend that if it's something like a package, you just rip it open and toss it out onto your salad plate. Don't stick your hands in there, because frankly our hands might not be
Clean.
as wonderfully
Yeah.
clean as we would like them to be.
Yes.
And if you say, I don't want to buy this type of pre-washed, look at this wonderful lettuce, I'm just going to buy a head of lettuce myself. And if you do this, you should be washing it at home. And in this case, the first thing you do is wash your sink, and then wash, and be sure also to wash your hands, and wash your counter in the area around, because when you turn the water on, there's a little aerosol comes up. And if there's harmful bacteria in your sink, that will come up as an aerosol, and it will go all around your sink and begin the process of cross-contamination of one bacteria getting on to surfaces that you might be eating without washing. So if you're going to be washing this, break the leaves off. This is butter lettuce. I love butter lettuce. But you might notice in this particular leaf, it's had a hard time. It's a little bit brown here. And bacteria like to grow in these areas
How
where the plant
interesting.
tissue is broken, because they can get at the nutrients that are in the plant.
Within the plant cells.
Within the
Yeah.
plant cells. So you'd rip that off and
Toss it.
throw it away. And then under running water, with my cleanly washed hands, gently rub the leaves on the front and back, and then also dry them afterwards, either in a salad spinner or gently with paper towel. And I'm saying paper towel. Remember, this comes from trees. Let's contribute to grow more trees. Problem with cloth towels is once it gets contaminated, you can contaminate, to other surfaces. So you need to use a fresh paper towel, both for your hand washing and for where you're washing of produce. So you should be washing produce that hasn't been pre-washed, and these you can just dump right out, but keep them cold.
Very interesting. What about the tomatoes?
Well, tomatoes are a wonderful product. As we've mentioned, you get a lot of great nutrients in the canned,
Yes.
but also in the fresh. And it's wonderful, nice and smooth. And you can wash it, again, rubbing your hands under cold running water. No need to buy special soaps or special
was
cleaning
going to ask
solutions.
you that, yes.
Water does just as well as these. They do not do significantly better. Water is fine. Do not soak these, because if there is contamination, it spreads all around. If there is contamination, and usually there is not, but cut out the little stem area, because if there is contamination, it comes into the product here. So I would just cut from here and here and get that little hard core out anyway, and then you can slice it up on a clean cutting board using a clean knife. And again, washing means using soap and water, not just water.
Very briefly, because we're almost out of time, what can you tell us about melon?
Yeah.
Melons grow on the ground.
Yes.
And they can carry bacteria because the earth carries bacteria.
Yes.
Even if they've been grown without pesticides, don't think these things are immune to washing. They need to be washed to remove the bacteria and earth. Use a scrub brush, a clean scrub brush. You can put this in your dishwasher to get it clean afterwards.
Yeah.
Rub under running water. And people say, why do I have to wash it? I'm not eating the rind. But in fact, when we cut through, any contamination that could be on the surface is spread to the interior flesh when you cut through. So you should wash and then pat dry your melon as well.
Well, I can see I have to change my entire routine.
Hopefully not too
Diane,
difficult.
would you like to add something to what Christine is saying? Yeah.
Well, I think Christine is correct. Some of these, actually, these we call fresh cut products, and some of them actually will tell you whether to wash them or not on the bag. But Christine is right. Most of them have gone through the facility where they prepare these, and they're washed quite well.
Yes, I will have to tell my
Yes.
son this very humbling.
And you know, it makes it easier for you.
It does.
It's more
It
convenient.
does.
Yes.
I agree. Well, that was his point.